Hello, I'm Ross Tayler, your host and guide for Sacred Sundays, a space to slow down, tune in, and return to what's sacred within and around you. I'm also a life coach for empaths and sensitive souls, walking alongside those who are ready to come home to who they actually are. These conversations are part of fulfilling that purpose, a collective exploration of what it means to live in connection with the sacred. Some weeks you'll hear a sound-based offering to open the space. Other times we'll simply begin in conversation. However it unfolds, this is an invitation into presence, connection, and the beauty of the unseen. If these conversations find you, please subscribe, rate, and share so others can find their way here. Pour a cup of tea, settle in, and let's begin. Today on Sacred Sundays, our guest is Danielle Searancke. So happy to have Danielle with us and have a conversation about all the wonderful things that she's doing in the world. And Danielle, I was trying to do the math around when I first met you, and I know I was working at Starbucks in Squamish, and I'm guessing it's more than 20 years ago. I remember working at the downtown store, and you used to come in early morning on your way to Vancouver, I believe. And it's wild even to think that it's that long ago.
Oh my goodness. Well, first, let me just say thank you for having me here and thank you for pronouncing my name absolutely correctly. You might be one of the first, so thank you so much. And you just totally blew my mind because my first point of reference for you is actually the solstice event many years later, but you are right. Like we met at Starbucks when I first moved to Squamish, and that was about 20 years ago I moved here.
Okay.
My crown was tingling. I was like, yes. I'm like, every morning I used to get a cross-eye coffee with 4 shots of espresso.
Oh, that's right.
I had major stomach issues after that, by the way. I can't do that anymore.
Oh, that's funny. Let's start with let everybody know about yourself, where you're at, what has got your attention these days, and what your focus is, and the things that are bringing you joy.
Yeah, so I always like to start by introducing myself. My name is Danielle Searancke, also known as the Squamish Medium. I am of Swampy Cree ancestry and membership of York Factory First Nations, and I also have Scottish ancestry on the other side of my family. I have resided on the Coast Salish unceded territories of the Squamish Nation for the past 20 years, almost half my life. It's a joy to be here today from these unceded territories. So I am a spiritual medium. I have been developing my mediumship for the past 13 years, which kind of came through the birth of my daughter. It has been a path that has been ever unfolding and a constant interest for me. So I've never ventured off of the mediumship path. But for the past couple of years, I have ventured more into teaching and mentoring other developing mediums. So those continue to be my day-to-day obsessions. I also had a side quest of building a really big business in which I'm currently in the process of simplifying and bringing some peace back into my life and some more time with my kids and my family. I have many, many interests, but that's how I like to typically introduce myself. And what's bringing me joy right now, I just got back from a month in New Zealand with my kids and my husband, and I felt like I got to reconnect with my kids. And then we went right into a spring break 2 weeks together. And I would say right now, it really is my kids who are 9 and 12 who are my joy. They're my source of inspiration. They're the reason why I want to get my life back to a place where I can have more freedom and just live more of life with them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I love that you said simplicity and peace, because it is interesting watching how what you've built has grown over the years. And I imagine that as you grow something, there's a cost, whether you're working somewhere or whether it's your own business, there's a place where you're giving so much of yourself to whatever that is. And there's a time when you have to start bringing that back to balance. And it feels like that's what you're talking about. And I'm sure that many people can relate to that.
Yeah, I think, one of the big things that we have to figure out in our humanity is what is enough, right? And I think that the scaling journey that I've been on for the past 8 years in particular, from podcast to all the things that I've done, which we can talk about or not, I reached a point probably about 2 years ago where it was almost like this breakdown to breakthrough moment where I was like, I think I know what enough is now. And it was just after I reached that point of this is too much.
Right.
Too much of me is required mentally, emotionally, spiritually, especially mentally. I would say that as somebody who lives in their heart, as somebody who, really quit a corporate job to be more intuitive, the demands mentally that were required of me of the growth that I created was not worth the trade-off for me. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what I've been in the past 2.5, 3.5 years, has been the mental capacity that I've overexpended. And I'm wanting to go back more to just being a bit of a sage, like a bit of a intuitive, more time in nature, more time with the dog, more time with the kids, more time doing things that fill me up.
And how has spirit guided you through this process? Because I sometimes feel like we have the experiences we have to go through in order to get these lessons. And so, what's the guidance you've been getting from spirit around that? Or is it just your own inner knowing and your own inner guidance that's bringing you to those answers or awareness?
Yeah, I will always make decisions based off some aspect of myself. Some aspects are my human desires. Like my human actually desires this. Some
Uh-huh.
aspects are I feel pulled towards this, so I'm going to say yes to this opportunity. And many and almost all the time, I do get signs from spirit. They don't say yes or no. They just say, we are present here while you are making this decision. I don't think that we can mess things up. I think
Uh-huh.
every choice we make leads us to a story to be told. Mediumship and spirituality through my stories of my life well lived. So, no regrets, even as I'm going through some of the hardest times I've ever had and things that have stretched me. I also realize I'm at the peak of my life and I'm never going to have more energy than right now. So, I still give it my all. I still put my all into it, knowing that this season's not going to last forever. And at the end of it, I'm going to have some incredible stories to tell and
Uh-huh.
some incredible things to write about. So, yeah, I feel like even though I could say this most recent chapter, maybe I zigged instead of zagged, I still felt spirit present. I still felt spirit guiding me. I still feel like it was something I had to do and I had to say yes to. But it did put me over the edge of certain capacities. And
Uh-huh.
in other ways, opportunities came that probably would not have aligned if I had not said yes, like the TV show. I built this big school, never done anything like that, essentially opened up a whole new business. And a week later, the TV show people came in. So I feel like in a lot of ways, even though this stretched me and kind of put me over the edge, the side quest came in that I wouldn't have traded for anything in the world.
Right. And so I want to come back to the TV show and let's just double back a bit because I imagine there's lots of people out there that are sort of at a crossroads with the things that they're saying yes to, the things they're giving their energy to. And I think more so than ever, we're all being taxed by the demands of the world. And I had a recent podcast guest say, like in an information way, like we're being blasted with this fire hose of information constantly. And we've never seen that before in our lifetime. So there's a lot of pressure that we're feeling. And so, what were the specific signs for you that something needed to change, or maybe throughout the course of growing this business? Like, what were the different hallmarks of like, oh, I got to slow down. Oh, I need to back away from this. What would you say about
Yeah.
that?
Well, as a manifesting generator, which you are as well, you get these waves, right? You get these
Hmm.
waves and then you get these ebbs. I've really learned to honor the ebbs and the waves. Like I will sit back for weeks and accomplish not a lot. And then when that wave comes back, I will take her for all she's worth and I will get as much done as human possible. But what I will say is I know that I need to step back when I'm in my trauma response of working more, working harder. So, like, I know myself well enough to know that if the answer to all my problems is just to work more, work harder, I am in fact in a trauma response and not making clear decisions. So,
Yeah.
it's only when I get the discipline, which I'm very disciplined and boundaried at, like, I will, let go of commitments. I will, for the sake of preservation. I've learned
Hmm.
that I'm always supported in some way, so I don't mind disappearing for a little bit to take care of myself, to recalibrate and recenter myself. It's actually the people in my membership that reflect that that's one of the things that they admire most, that I can just step back even from them and just say, I'm in preservation mode right now. And it gives them
Hmm.
permission. Whereas before, there was a lot of guilt before I became harmonious with this step that I take towards getting clarity. I used to feel a lot of guilt. It's like, oh, I'm going to disappear for a week and they're not getting their value. And
Hmm.
again, that trauma response for me is very much working more because I've had this workhorse energy since I was 9.
Sure. And
Yeah.
for those of us that have that sustainable energy to go when we need to, or when there's a demand to do that, we actually can be in functional burnout longer than we realize. And I'll
Yes.
never forget, I think it was around 2011. I was working at the Starbucks in Squamish, and I went to the door. It was just before Christmas, and I put my hand on the door, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it was just this clear message. And you know how busy the medical clinic was there, and I'm sure it still is now. And
Yes.
literally, I walked 2 doors down. It was at Garibaldi Village. I walked 2 doors down to the clinic, whatever time it was of the day. There was nobody in there. It was like this divine intervention. I got straight in to see the doctor and got a 2-week leave of work, and I never went back to that role. I stayed with Starbucks, but I didn't go back to the manager role after that. But it's a sign of, like he said to me, he goes, if you keep on this path, you're going to have a heart attack. You're going to go a path you don't want to go down. He goes, you need to stop.
Yeah. And I have hit burnout. I've been hospitalized with heart palpitations. That's why I quit my corporate career. So there's definitely physical signs you have to pay attention to. I heard somebody with persistent illness describe it as, listen to your body's whispers before you hear their screams.
Mm.
And that's something that I'm always paying attention to. My gut is, maybe it's a woman's thing because we carry so much in our womb space and our guts, but my gut is always very telling for me, like when it's always in a constant tension. And I can just feel it. So being an entrepreneur, it's great because I have the spaciousness and the privilege to be able to honor and listen to these spaces. And if I don't, that's my fault.
Right.
So I have to fix it.
And to what you're saying, like being a manifesting generator, your sacral womb space is the life force and creativity that's wanting to be expressed. And so that is part, like you have emotional authority. So it's like, that's what's actually guiding you, but you still have that in the moment, yes or no, that is saying energy towards or not. And that is an important thing to listen to from that sacral space.
It is. And I'll be honest, like I feel like I have like an inner 14-year-old that sometimes takes the show and says, no, I want this anyways. And I have done that. I have, for the sake of experience, I always go like YOLO or like, I know you don't only live once as a medium, but what I would say is that like, I'm in this life for the full experience. And even if something ultimately ends up being really hard, it doesn't mean I'm not going to try it, just even for the plot, right? I'm going to do this for the plot. And I have done it just for the adventure of it all because I've learned over the years how to repair. And I think that repair and that restoring balance is really one of the things that we're here to figure out. It's not to be balanced. I think that that's an illusion. I think it's about learning what restores you, learning how to give yourself what you need so that you can come back to balance. I think living a life where you never want to reach that state, you're not living, right? So learning how to restore balance, I think, is a huge thing that has sustained me for this long.
I mean, I sometimes have this image of my guides, like, oh my God, he's going the wrong way again. Like, how are we going to get him to go in this direction? And at the same time, I imagine that that's not the case.
Our guides are here to guide us, right? They're not here to define for us like what we're meant to do. I hear my guides quite clearly. I have like the first spirits I ever became aware of were spirit guides. I have a really faithful relationship with my guides. And my guide said to me one time when I was really torn between leaving my corporate career because I had like it made there. Like I never had to leave. I could have had it completely made. But I knew my soul wanted to try something different, to like take a chance to try something completely new. But it took me 2 years to actually make the leap. And what happened to those 2 years was 2 health crises because I was in that, what in trauma-informed care we would call functional freeze. Right. It's like I'm functioning, but I'm in like this frozen paralysis state, unable to completely move. And it was actually the apex of a 3rd health crisis that said, you got to take a chance. You absolutely have to. And what my guide said to me during this time, which gave me almost enough gusto to make a move, but not quite enough. Again, only you can really give yourself that push to make a move. But they said, it doesn't matter what you pick. I promise you, you will get to where you're going. You'll just have a different story when you get there. So just make your choice. And it made me realize like life is to be experienced fully. And so I don't think our guides are ever, hey, no, but I do think that they can reveal to us a couple different paths that we can take, a path of ease, a path of like no change, of just kind of like, just cruising along, and then a path that's a little bit more unknown, but a little bit stickier, crunchier. But sometimes it is those sticky, crunchy paths that really develop us and grow us and expand us in some of the best ways. So
Hmm.
sometimes I have to use my discernment, given how much capacity I have on what decision, aka path, I want to make. But I have taken a tricky path a couple times and I don't regret them all.
That's good. And I do hear what you're saying. I mean, I think of many times in my life where later on I look back and I'm so grateful that the hardships and the experiences happened because they were forming who I became. But I didn't
Yeah.
see it when I was in it.
Yeah.
And of course, we don't want to hear that when we're in it. It's like, oh, this is happening for a reason. It's like, no, I don't want to hear that right now. I'm in it. But at some point, we recognize, like, I recognize like all these different jobs that I had at different points. Like, I worked at a call center in Squamish for a while and I hated that job.
Me
And
too.
that,
Is it Connections? Did you work
yeah,
at Connections? Yeah.
I did. And I couldn't stand that job. And yet it gave me the ability to speak and articulate myself well because in the moment I had to do that. And so it's like I got skills from that job and yet
Yeah.
didn't like it. But in hindsight, I was like grateful for it.
Well, and I think sometimes we have to learn how to walk away from something. Like that's huge growth,
Hmm.
right? So there are a few times in my life I can look back where I was like, that was a wrong choice. Clear as day. Like I married a stranger once when I was 18, the first time I met them. I knew that that was not the best choice. I knew that that was like not the best choice. I remember a financial decision I made when I was like 18 that I knew it was not the best choice. And I still made it and I could feel the
Sure.
protection coming in like this is not the best choice. And I have to live with those and learn how to accept them without being
Hmm.
hard on myself. And even that is a huge growth. Like learning to accept something
Hmm.
is something. Where else would you learn that? You got to learn it
Right.
somewhere. And so, like, even those situations where I know I didn't listen to my intuition, I still see as like huge, huge, huge blessings. And I agree with you too about, I read this article on Substack a couple weeks ago about like spiritual gaslighting and saying things like everything happens for a reason is spiritual bypassing in a lot of ways. And it can be really harmful. But I think too, people like to singularize things. I don't even know if that's a word, by the way, but it's like there's a single reason why this happened. When in fact, if we see things from a higher perspective, there's 1,000 things that benefited from that one experience. There's
Yeah.
so many things, a multitude of things. And I think that this is spiritual maturity where we can leave that singular thinking and just say there's 1,000 things that came from this experience, and like 20% was shadow and like 80% was light. So sometimes I just ask my higher self to hold on to the higher teachings, the higher learnings, and teach me how to accept the ones that I have to like let go of.
Hmm.
But I feel like my most recent adventure was my teaching of having to learn how to let go of something again.
Hmm.
Right. And I kind of felt that. And it was still like
Yeah.
really hard because the ego comes up. It's like, no, but, all these reasons. But my spirit was tired. And it's like, who
Hmm.
am I going to listen to, the human or like the spirit? And that's kind of like the choice I have to make sometimes. And that's one only I can make.
And letting go, I think, is one of the hardest things that we do over and over again. Like to release our grip. The ego has a sense of, oh, it must look this way and it must be this. And what we're doing, I believe, is we're limiting the possibilities of what spirit can do for us when we hang on so tight.
Yeah.
And yet there's lessons that come from that as well eventually. But I can think of so many times that I had to let go of something and it was so hard because I thought that it was the path that I was meant to be on. It's yeah, I mean, it's the mind versus listening to the wisdom of our body.
Yeah. And it leads into a deeper conversation around grief.
Mm,
I think that when I look at the things that I guess how I would like to phrase it is I can see how grief and even some unprocessed grief, because we don't put that proper label on it when we have to let something go and we don't do the ritual, we don't do the ceremony, we don't do the processing around it. It can sit in our bodies as unprocessed grief, right? I wrote an article recently about my 6th year in full-time entrepreneurship and this teaching around having to let this go. And what came up for me was like, a dream realized and unsustained has its own kind of grief attached to it.
mm,
And I would say that this is the first time, even in my own life, that I realized like there's this compound grief that we collect through our lives where we have to let things go and we don't do what needs to be done to process them. when I lost my first, I call person, but it was my cat, when I hit capital G grief from the loss of a loved one,
Hmm.
I realized in that grief, I'm like, wow, I had this when I quit the race car company when I moved to Squamish. I worked for a race car team. I was like, when I quit, because it was like a family, I had this grief come up. I remember times where I was really hard on myself, shitting on myself. The feeling was very similar to grief on
Hmm.
like maybe a lower spectrum of it. And that was something I was thinking of before we even came online today. I didn't know if grief would come up, but
Hmm.
if I could say to the listeners of the people who listen to your beautiful podcast, it's like, don't underestimate how grief sits in our body and what we can do to process that grief.
I love that you brought this up because recently I've gone to a few death cafes here in Nanaimo and love the organic conversation that comes from them. And really I didn't know what a death cafe was until I showed up. And actually it wasn't labeled as a death cafe, which probably helped me to show up. And yet it's a death cafe. And so what I love was just the ability to have conversations about grief and about death and dying and all of these things that, to me, it's sad that we have this relationship with grief and dying that is so much in the shadows in North American culture. And one of the things I remember is working somewhere, and it was when I got divorced. And I remember my boss said, like a week later, he says, "Can we get back to work now?" And I was
Mm,
just like, wow, like, can we get back to work now? And I remember the feeling of that. And that was just about grieving my relationship that had ended, let alone like losing someone. Like we we're going so fast. Like I think of other cultures where everything stops, everybody stops working to support each other, and we don't have the ability to do that. So it's such a sign of where we're moving so fast and our body doesn't get a chance to catch up to itself. And that's why we have unprocessed grief, because we had to keep going.
yeah. And I agree. And thank you for bringing all of that in. I feel that we are also a society that glorifies youth. We don't even look at death, right?
Hmm.
Everything's like Botox and anti-wrinkle, and we idolize, glorify, and pedestal youth above all else. Of course, we're not going to
Hmm.
look at the other side of it. But I also just want to add that in North America, our indigenous people are processing. They have potlatches, multi-day potlatches that, it's a right for anyone in the spiritual space to go back in their own lineage to see how we process grief. Like even my Scottish, even as a medium, I remember giving a reading to somebody in Scotland and the spirit world showing me it's like a living wake or a wake. And
Yeah.
I got to experience this wake from the spirit world. And I was like, I don't want to leave this place.
Hmm.
And the Scottish wake is just so embodied. It's like drinking and
Hmm.
cheersing and dancing and yelling. And I was like, how beautiful is that process to honor
Hmm.
somebody's life and the experience? Like, I feel like if in North America, we can bring back some of our teaching, some of our culture, going back to our own lineages.
Sure.
And that's what's needed to kind of balance and to stop pedestaling youth.
And so many of those teachings or those lineages have been silenced in a lot of ways too, systematically, like the actual history of what they represent. Like you mentioned Scotland, and I know that in Ireland, they have whalers that come from the community to actually be a part of helping to inspire that grief. And so there's so many different things that happen, and I wonder if those things have been somehow systematically hidden from us. And that's why we have to go back to our origins to be able to find these rituals and traditions. And I love that you pointed to the fact that it's happening here in indigenous culture, because it is, like, in many ways. And I've had the blessing of experiencing some of those ceremonies, and it's beautiful. And I also feel the sadness around not having access to that in my own culture.
And that's a collective grief I can feel since 2020, like since, the
Hmm.
pandemic and there's this big divisiveness. I was like, man, we're just missing culture.
Right.
It's culture is the missing piece. Like people need a culture to connect in with or connect
Hmm.
to. And, of course, so many of us are settlers here. It's like it's up to us to kind of go back into our own lineages to bring that through in an authentic way and
Sure.
non-appropriative of way, in a way that truly helps because it's connected to our ancestry, our lines.
Hmm.
Grief, I think, is one of the underrated maybe causes of a lot of the symptoms that we are experiencing in our lives.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's documented as well in so many ways. I think of Gabor Mate, When the Body Says No, and
Yeah.
many other books that highlight that, whether it's grief or whether it's stress, I think it's all intertwined because, or I mean, you could even root it back to the nervous system, the fact that we're living in fight or flight, most of us,
Yeah,
and the impact that
constantly.
that has on the body. When we're just trying to survive, we're not able to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you bringing up death cafes, because sometimes we can't go back to the old ways, right?
Hmm.
It may be a little bit childlike to think that we can go back to like truly old ways. Even our communities are bringing in new songs, new practices, new ceremonies because so many was taken away. That's
Hmm.
how people are healing and reconciling. But things like death cafes, I'm a death doula. I got death doula certification training through Douglas College in 2019.
Nice.
And so I feel like we are in a time where this is coming back and starting to get normalized. And it's conversations like this that are
Sure.
being normalized. I know even, watching Oprah in the 90s, there was that book, Tuesdays with Maury. And it really is the people who are in that later transition who can teach us about a good life lived.
Hmm. Or a life unlived as well. Like
Yeah.
that's I think that comes up as well. The things we didn't get to do or the things we didn't allow ourselves to do.
Yeah. I would say that getting my death doula training and going through that process and, ultimately in mediumship, I'm also working with that transition. To me, it has been an incredibly life affirming experience. It has actually made me want to live
Hmm.
more life. And it's quite a paradox. And I think that that is one of the things that we are also kind of moving into in society is like accepting some of these paradoxes, like moving out of
Sure.
that singular thinking, like we're saying. Another thing I wanted to mention, you talked about earlier, because you brought up Gabor, when we look at the way that we're living now and this go, go, go and unable to slow down enough, integrate and like process a lot of things, even on like social and email and texting and WhatsApp. It's like our brains are not wired for this level of contact with one another either. And that's something, my way of restoring and repairing for myself is I will just put out of offices everywhere. Like you won't be able to reach me by DM on Instagram. And it does hurt my business because my business is very relational. And like when
Hmm.
I'm not there to maintain relationships, like my earnings definitely, you can feel the earnings of that shift. But I still choose it because it is one of the ways that I repair is removing access just for preservation. And that's how I kind of like restore my mind. And I have to make some of those tough choices sometimes too.
Yeah, and you're bringing up something so important because I was listening to a podcast the other day and the person said, we have to make a choice. Like, do we want to be synthetic or do we want to be authentic? And when she was referring to the synthetic, she was referring to a lot of what you're talking about, social media and the way people portray themselves. It's not real. We think
Yeah.
it's real, but it's not real. And do we want to be authentic? And she went on about that. And it really got me thinking about, like, the only reason I'm on Instagram, for example, is to put the reels up for the podcast. And yet, it's a practical step, and yet there's a cost to it because now I'm on Instagram and I'm
Yeah.
scrolling and I'm looking and I want to turn it off. And just yesterday, I was like, I got a message on Instagram, a message on Facebook, a message on WhatsApp, an email, a text message. And I was like, how did we get here? Like, we're just getting dinged from all these different places. And you're right. Like, it doesn't feel good. It's too much.
It's
And it's not
overwhelming.
even practical. Like, we should have one source if we're going to have that much. And I think when you're saying out of office is you're directing people to where they need to go. So we do have choice, which is powerful. But I, the cost, the cost of some of these things is much greater than the financial cost that you mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I work in the world of energy. If I don't have
Right.
energy, I can't do my work. So my energy has to be my number one priority. So if you've been Instagramming me for the past year, you've gotten out of office with like a link to my offerings. And that was a huge change for me as well. But I realized like I had a lot of unprocessed grief. Even
Mm-hmm.
the success that I've seen over the past 5, 6 years, I don't think I celebrated once. It's like I'm not even
Mm.
taking the space to appreciate everything like I do have because there's always the next thing. There's always the next thing. And then there's the sustaining, right? And sustaining
Right.
has its own kind of weight to it. So yeah, it's been wild, but I really do feel like a bit counterculture, like making these rebel moves to like preserve instead of do what I'm supposed to do. But it's absolutely paramount in my work and on this path to give myself that space, or else I'm in that
Mm-hmm.
functional freeze, this
Sure.
vortex. Can't move
Sure.
out.
And you've mentioned a few things. One of them is on human design, and I actually don't call it human design anymore. I refer to it as energy. Like we're aligning with and coming home to our natural energy. And so there's so many things that go along with that, like what feels right for us and being in alignment with what flows and what doesn't flow. And when we do that, and a lot of it has to do with slowing down to the point where we're not running through life, because when we run through life, we're missing all the signs that Spirit is trying to give us. But when we slow down, we see all those things. And that's been a huge and continues to be a thing of growth for me, like to recognize when I'm going too fast. And yet the world is moving so fast. So it's hard. We have to keep up. We have to do things. But I think the fact that Spirit has a chance to be a part of the the solution when we slow down is the biggest thing that we can't see and we can't see the value of.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember this is one of my favorite teachings that people like when I share this, but I remember a time where I was like really starting to pick up in my mediumship practice. And then I had my commute to Vancouver every day and my job there that I absolutely loved. And I was really overwhelmed. And I remember driving home and saying to my spirit team, it's like, I don't feel you anymore. I don't see you anymore. Like, where
Mm,
have you gone? And immediately I heard an inspired thought come in that said, you don't look up anymore. And I looked up and there was 3 eagles flying over my car, and it really brought a teaching to my heart that was just so wide and expansive that when I'm looking for spirit, I need to look up. And
mm-hmm.
I love the language of the art of noticing. And one of the ways that I will move from the busyness, and it only takes a minute, but if you even just go outside and look at your front lawn or look at the nature around you and
Sure.
just notice for a minute, you will slow right down because, yes, the world moves fast, but it doesn't. Nature moves quite slow. And if
Mm-hmm.
we can move down with the pace of the real indigenous of this planet, the tree people, the bush people, the plant people, we will recalibrate to the pace that
Yeah.
serves us best.
I love that. And it reminds me of when I worked at the Paradise Valley Healing Center. Well, there was 2 houses and guests would have to walk between the 2 houses. And when people arrived, they'd be looking at the sidewalk as they were going from one house to the other. And eventually, as the healing started to happen, they would start to look up. And guess what they would see? They'd see an eagle, just like you described, and they would start to notice nature. And you know that place, it's beautiful there. It's like, it's Paradise Valley for a reason. And all the guests would start to have these experiences that they otherwise wouldn't have in their everyday life. So it was really this beautiful thing to witness. And I will often be out in nature and see something, and there's people that are on their walk talking and they don't see it. It's like, there's an eagle right there. It's like, hello
Yeah.
everyone, can't you see the eagle that's up in the tree? Like,
Yeah.
it's magic once we do that. But I love that Spirit gave you that message to look up.
Yeah. There's a National Look Up Day. I think
Really?
it's like April 14th. I keep meaning to bring it up on social media. I'm like, if anything other than memes I could post, it could be National Look Up Day because this has been a
Sure.
teaching that I've had for all 6 years of my teaching, and students love it because their heart just opens up when they hear it because
Hmm.
all of us can resonate with that and relate to that. So I think spirit is always here. They're always around us. It's just where our awareness is, where our worldview is very indicative of what we'll experience.
Hmm.
So if we want to experience spirit, look at the spirit around us that's everywhere and you'll become in like resonance with it.
Hmm. So I want to ask you, I think of a lot of clients that I've had over the years who they kind of at the end of a session they'll be like, "Oh yeah, and by the way, I have this gift," or I see dead people, or I'm psychic. And it's like this little bit of it's kind of like they put it out there at the last minute and they doubt themselves. There's this imposter syndrome. There's this like, how can this be real? How can I put this out in the world? And there's so much resistance and secrecy around it. And I think that that's changing. Obviously, it's changing, and people are stepping more into their gifts. But I also believe that some people are still in that place. So, what would you say to someone who is just on the edge of bringing those gifts out, even just for themselves?
Yeah. I would say beliefs are really powerful in this work.
Mm,
They are paramount as you advance in mediumship. They are absolutely paramount. So the first thing I would have somebody do is like take stock in and audit their beliefs or disbeliefs around said practice, whether it's mediumship, psychic, intuition, and really check in with your sacral and check in and say, is this mine? Right? Is this mine? Can I let it go? Whatever. And by way, my prayer is this mine? By way of, I release everything that is not mine. Are these resistances mine? Are they programmed from religion, from parents, from culture, right? So our beliefs kind of come from somewhere. And one of the most beautiful things as free will adults we have is we get to choose what we believe. Like we get to choose it. That's part of our free will, right? Faith, like spiritual maturity is going from belief to faith. And handing that over and surrendering that control, right? So we really start our belief systems around the sacral, our connection to our maternal line, our paternal lines, our tribes, our cultures. And so to really, as a first step, like believe it to be true for you and really question anything that counters that belief. That alone should open up your awareness, and then just get to know awareness, right? Like spiritual awareness. It's a really big topic, but it's the foundation of all spiritual capacities. What are you aware of? So even when I sit down to become a medium and I sit down for a session, I have to become aware of my energy, my thoughts, my vibe of the day. And then I open up my awareness, and then I become aware of spirit communicators coming through that are not me. So a lot of like mediumship training is like meditation, simply because you become aware of your own energy, and then you can be able to discern things that are not you, not your thoughts, not yours. So awareness and practicing awareness is a great first step. I always believe our guides are guiding us down different curiosities. So I just try to follow all those curiosities. Like, why was I drawn to mediumship since I was 13? And then so many other people I meet were drawn to Reiki or like hands-on healing and find their way into it. So it's just around really following those curiosities and believing like the Creator never puts a dream in our heart we cannot accomplish or achieve. So even the fact that you have awareness around this is a sign that you should pursue it and just see what your capacity is around it.
And yet choosing your belief is a radical act in this world we live in.
Rebellious.
Or at least it can feel like it. Right? Because we're going to get judged by the neighbors. We're going to get judged by our coworkers. We're going to get judged by our parents, perhaps. And yet the value of making that choice and doing what we want and expressing our free will it's amazing, because we're going to open doors that weren't open before.
Yeah. And that's the first step of empowerment. Like you can empower yourself just through what you choose to believe, and even what you choose to let go of beliefs. Like, even in mediumship, things that I believed 13 years ago don't stand the test of experience. I've had to mature through evolving my own beliefs around the spirit world, around what happens to us when we transition, because I keep having more experiences. So the sooner that you can learn how to negotiate and exercise your empowered free will around this, it will support you as you develop and mature as an intuitive.
Yeah. So earlier I said I would come back to the TV show, and I want to honor that. And and I also think of, the journey that I know of you, which is, I remember having a reading at what was it actually? Solstice. It was at the Waldorf School, the Solstice.
Yeah,
that's right.
It was a solstice event. My first ever paid readings. Right.
Yeah. And I remember having a reading with you that day. And that was actually, I think it was my birthday too that day, which was interesting. And I remember the messages that came through. And then I had a second reading with you, I think, at another solstice event. And then I remember being at an event where you did your first audience.
Oh, group reading.
Mediumship group
reading.
Were you
at the first one?
I was, yeah.
I avoided those my whole career.
Really? But I remember it was great. Yeah. And do you still do those?
Well, yeah. I mean, for the TV show, there's one on every episode. So I mentioned it before we hit record, but I've had debilitating stage fright my whole life. You would never think it, but I could not even speak in front of a room of 8 people. So when I was training as a medium, group readings is eventually what you want to do, but I would just skip over every chapter of every book that mentioned group readings. Like, it was not in my future. I didn't even want to do it. So I was like, I'm not going to stand in front of a room. But what happened was, funny enough, Ross, is I was in that pivotal moment of deciding to leave my career. And when I feel like I'm not living life to its fullest, I will ask myself, what is the scariest thing I can do right now so that I can feel that life force energy again? I need to do something to shake me up. And at the time, the scariest thing I could do was a group reading. So I actually planned it on the full moon in Leo, right? So I was like, full moon in Leo. And it was one of the most magical experiences of my life. It was me really pushing myself to do something scary, to feel life force again. So I'm glad that you were there because you were also my first ever paid client. First ever paid
Wow.
reading
I
was
forgot about
you.
that. Okay.
Yeah, and I was $20. I'm 500 now. It was like over like 13 years. But like even that solstice event, I had no intention of being a reader professionally. I just loved
Mhm.
development. I'd been developing for 4
Sure.
years by that night. I just loved the personal growth and connecting to spirit. And I loved my career at the time as well. But yeah, that was a great night. And what I found was, and this has been very true of my entire career, is like I did that one night of I think 4 or 5 readings that night.
Mhm.
And you each told people about it. And so like the next week I had like 10 emails. And
Yeah.
so it seems like every time I do a reading, 2 more people want a reading. And that has been my career. It's been very organic, just organically growing. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, that was like you've been there for both of my stretchy first time nights. That's so fun.
That's really interesting because there's another guest that was on my podcast, and it's Nicole Powell, who was also in
Yeah.
Squamish years ago,
Yeah.
and she's on Vancouver Island. And her and I have a similar kind of story. It's like I would cross paths with her at pivotal moments as well. Once when she arrived on the island and I was here and I was leaving the island, and when I came back to the island, she was leaving the spiritual church where she was doing readings, and she's like, "I can't believe you're here." It's really interesting. And I have that with you as well. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, yeah. So those group readings, I'm happy you know about spiritualism. So I'm not a spiritualist medium. I'm an indigenous medium. But in
Hmm.
spiritualism, it really is the end goal to do platform work, right? And
Right.
I was like, well, I'm not even a spiritualist, so I'm not even going to do this. But the truth
That's
is, I was
funny.
just scared to speak in front of a group. So when it came to the
Mm.
TV show, the funny thing was, first day of filming, first thing they have me do is a group reading. I'm like,
Wow.
really? And so I had to really just get used to them. And so leading up to it, I knew that was coming. I had a 6-month head up of filming. And so at Spirit School HQ, I did as many group readings as I possibly could just to
Okay.
be comfortable and have it be like organic and natural. So I do like doing them because spirit organizes very differently when I do group work versus when I do one-on-one. And that in
Yeah.
itself is interesting enough to keep me in front of that room. But I will say it's still the last thing I'll do.
That's interesting. Because I wouldn't say that I had debilitating stage fright, but I definitely had stage fright for years. And I don't have it anymore. Like
Yeah, I
I'm
don't either.
I'm happy to like do a group without being prepared at
Yeah.
times and just go with the
Yeah,
flow and improv.
I call it exposure therapy. Like, I think that's the best name for it. Like,
Yeah.
and I tell people this even with developing mediumship. I'm like, look, it's like every other skill in life. The more you do it, the better you get.
Hmm.
Right. It's like it's a muscle. It's like it's something. And that's so true. Like, I think podcasting, because I podcasted for 8 years, I really tell people I healed my throat chakra. I really did heal my
Hmm.
stage fright through podcasting consistently for 8 years. I found my voice. I became fluid and more comfortable. But I think for me, it's like having everyone's eyeballs on me is like the
Hmm.
hardest part. So I don't wear glasses during my group reading, so I can't see details.
I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's come back to the TV show. What would you like people to know about the TV show? Because I think that's kind of the thing that is most alive right now. Where can they watch it? Tell us more
Yeah,
about that.
well, I haven't even announced it on my Instagram or anything yet. Like you
Okay.
guys only know about the TV show if you're on my Facebook. So, we filmed for 8 months. It will be on APTN and then it will be on different streaming services, but I don't have an exact launch date yet. I'm going to feel into fall, but it was a really, really great adventure. I can't say very much about it other than maybe I could
Hmm.
tell you how it came about, which
Sure.
is kind of like a fun story. But I think it's a really passionate show that's going to highlight the best and the most real of humanity and the human experience. So my mediumship work is all about the healing and reconciling, and that really came through in the show and the people who we serve through the show. And I'm very excited for that. But it was actually when I was building Spirit School, you talk about these guided experiences, and I was looking for an office, and I girl bossed way too close to the sun and ended up with this oceanfront studio with these offices. Very spirit led, all the signs, hawks, the money, the contractors. Like within 2 weeks, this thing was like rolling. And
Hmm.
I actually hit burnout after the build of it because it was really intense hosting my first retreat, building the school, doing all my regular service work. When I got the keys to Spirit School, I completely crashed. And I canceled everything and I hid in my office eating leftover charcuterie board from the open house. And I had this major crash moment. And it was probably 2 days later, I had these incredible indigenous women show up at my front door, and they had cameras outside, and they just walked in asking me what I did and that I was First Nations, and they were first interested in a ghost show. And I said, I don't do that. I work for the angels.
Mm-hmm.
I really think ghosts are kind of like first stage spirituality, and then you evolve and you move beyond. And I feel like I've moved beyond a bit. So the TV show started in 2023. We started the process, if you can believe it. And we just wrapped up filming in January 2026. And so it has been a very long, multi-year process. And when people ask me questions, I say, I have no idea. And I won't know until last minute. And I hear nothing for months. And then all of a sudden it's a flurry of life. But it was the most fun experience I've had in my life. I healed during filming. I could feel my brain rewiring. I could feel my nervous system rewiring, just being surrounded by people who appreciate what I do, who believe in what I do, who are also entrepreneurs and creative, which everyone on the film crew is an entrepreneur, a contractor, and a creative artist. I have never had such a profound experience as being with the film crew for months at a time. I made friends for life. It was just like the best experience. I loved it.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And as you were speaking, I got chills. I could really feel the power of what this show is going to be. So thank you for the teaser.
Yeah,
and I love that
you got
it
the
happened.
first teaser.
I love that it came about. So I think that's why I wanted to go back to it, because you said that you had just transitioned out of something and spirit really just guided you to this thing and it showed up. And such a great example of when we let go of something or when we loosen our grip, something shows up.
And it's interesting because I had a reading with an astrologer who kind of foresaw something big and visible happening. He said, but you have to meet the opportunity. Like you have to meet it. And I'm a very passive person in the sense where like I'm kind of float with the wind. I'm like, where do you want me to go, spirit? And so I'll be honest with you that like for about 6 months, I didn't think I wanted the opportunity because of my stage fright. And I've never wanted something like this. And it wasn't until I reached a moment where I was like, you know what? Why not? Like, let's go for this. And it was really like a day or two after I hit that acceptance that the opportunity continued. So I don't know if that helps somebody out there, but if you're like waiting for something, like for me, just energetically meeting that opportunity changed the entire opportunity in itself.
Well, I can relate to that because this podcast, my friend came up with the idea and he said, hey, Ross, do you want to do this? It'll be like 20 minutes, won't be very long, simple form podcast. And I was like, oh, 20 minutes, I could do that. And so I said yes, but it wasn't easy for me to say yes. Like I needed to understand and be able to relate to how this would be and how it would grow. And it's been one of the greatest things I've done. And it lines up with my human design. It's really organic. And I love it because I don't have to prep. I get to just show up and ask questions and go with the flow. Some guests are like, you don't prepare questions? And I don't need to.
Yeah.
Right. That's great.
Well, I have been in the podcasting space since 2017. So I've been interviewed on dozens of podcasts, and I can attest that you are a fantastic interviewer, very relational and genuine, absolutely genuine. And so I'm really happy for you, and I'm excited for this for you. And I can't wait to see where this goes for you.
Well, this feels like a great place to end our conversation. I really appreciate the areas that we got to cover and the conversation we got to have. And it's beautiful to reflect on the journey that you've been on and to have been there at different points in the journey and to connect with you and to give the listeners the opportunity to hear your perspective on mediumship and the other topics that we got to touch on. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And I always close with a question, which is, what is one simple way someone could connect with the sacred today?
I think that the best way is just taking a breath with the intention to access the sacred within. And even as I do that, in one breath, I can feel restoration.
I love it. I love simple. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All
beautiful.
right.
Well, thank you for the beautiful conversation.
You're welcome. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on Sacred Sundays. I hope something in today's offering spoke to your spirit, stirred something true, or simply gave you a moment to breathe. If this conversation resonated, please subscribe, rate, or share. It truly helps this work reach the people who are meant to find it. If you'd like to step inside my world a little further, I host a free live practice 3 mornings a week called Start With You. Just 20 minutes on Zoom to return to your own energy. Everything you need can be found at the link in the show notes. Until next time, may your day be slow and sacred.